Welcome to the offices of economic and manpower analyses. Here in our story, it's sprawling. What's Potemkin campus? My name is Benji.
You're listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. In this episode, we're talking about Die Jugend Marschiert, America's Army, which is track number 6 on 2005's Potemkin City Limits. And the title of the song is twofold. America's Army is a series of first-person shooter video games developed and released by the U.S. Army intended to recruit prospective soldiers. It was launched in 2002, and the game was designed to allow Americans to virtually explore the Army and allowed them to determine if becoming a soldier fits their interests and abilities. America's Army represents the first large-scale use of game technology by the U.S. government as a platform for strategic communication and recruitment, and the first use of game technology in support of U.S. Army recruiting.
You know, and I was looking about some background on this, and it says I found that the version was released on 4th of July, 2002, which is obviously a symbolic release date. But like this thing has seen a long life. Like as of January of 2014, there were 41 versions of this game. And it was financed by the U.S. government and distributed as a free download. And I got to tell you, man, I went and I played this game over the weekend. And in the lead up to recording this episode, you can go to the website americasarmy.com, and they have like a Steam, and then you play it live off of an online streaming platform called steampowered.com. And I did an extract objective mission in which I was expected to rescue a captured soldier. And I'm not a huge video games person. You know, I play a few things like Little Big Planet and Worms Armageddon on PS3 with my kid. So like I can't compare this to other games really, because like I'm not a Call of Duty player. I'm not, you know, I'm just, that's just not who I am. But like same. the fact that it's free, when you think about like parents throughout, you know, time in this society, the thought of like getting your kid like $60 video games is an overwhelming expense. You know what I mean? That really adds up quick. So the fact that this game is free and the fact that video games are normally extremely expensive says a lot about the power of this game to be a possibly very wide-reaching game. Because like if a parent's like, oh, I got to pay $60 for Call of Duty, but there's also this free version over here, maybe we're going to save the $60. So, you know, it says a lot, but America's Army has also been used to deliver virtual military experiences to participants at air shows, amusement parks, and sporting events around the country.
Yeah, Greg, I really wonder if this is like the modern version of sending recruiters to like the poorest communities, high schools, to talk with and to recruit people from at-risk and marginalized neighborhoods, now having a video game being an extension of that, since they don't even have to pay for it.
Yeah, and you know, there's versions on Xbox, and there's arcade versions, and there's mobile versions. So like this thing really is kind of everywhere if you wanted it. But like the idea for the game was conceived in 1999 by Colonel Casey Wardinsky, the Army's chief economist and professor at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And Wardinsky, with regards to America's Army, envisions using a computer game technology to provide the public a virtual soldier experience that is engaging, informative, and entertaining. So America's Army was managed by 2 other U.S. Army officers serving with Wardinsky at the Office of Economic and Manpower Analysis, OEMA. And, you know, that name of that office shows up in this song. But the game was developed by Wardinsky, who recognized that a video game might be helpful to the U.S. Army in the strategic communications efforts by providing more information to prospective soldiers to help them reduce the number of recruits who wash out during basic training, essentially. So the effort has reached about 13 million players who have registered America's Army accounts over the years. And there are more than 260 million hours played on the various titles. So, I found an article in the Christian Science Monitor where a teenager who plays the game says that it provides great information and that would probably spark an interest. I don't know how I would have found out so much another way. And then it says I would also definitely consider giving my skills to the Army. But if nothing else, when I get back, I'll go to the website and download the game and play it just for fun. So there's like quotes and information out there demonstrating that this game actually has sort of a reach and an impact, and it has like persuaded and changed some minds and opened people's minds up to the possibility of what this game was actually set up to do, which is recruit people into the military. But there's a parody website that Propagandy made at americasarmy.ca, which Lang Huck found, and which is still live, and you can go and see it at americasarmy.ca. So there's americasarmy.com, which is where you can play the game, and americasarmy.ca, which is Propagandy's version.
It's interesting, Greg. Like, I think of gamers as being perhaps not the most easy to win over audience.
Yeah, skeptics.
You know what I mean? Like, they seem to be very opinionated, and I don't say this in any critical or harsh way. I just think like what is popular and what they like is very. It can be a hard market to crack.
Yeah.
And given the culture behind gaming, given like how much it's changed in the last 15 years with online gaming. And to see that even if a little bit, like what you would think is an institution out of touch, like the U.S. military, is able to crack into that certainly is, that's pretty worrisome.
Yeah, and I am very aware that I am not a video game player. I know virtually nothing. So in this episode, I'm sure that people will be listening who have a ton more gaming experience than me, and I would love to hear feedback and comments on this actual game if people out there have experience with it. So obviously our email is propagandipod@gmail.com or on Twitter and Instagram @propagandipod. So definitely if you have gaming experience and you really have some strong opinions and thoughts on this episode and this particular song and this game, let us know.
Well, Greg, we talked about the first part of the title, America's Army. How about the second part of the title?
Right. So next is Die Jugend Marschiert. And the phrase Die Jugend Marschiert is German for the Youth March, which is a reference to the audio recording of the Hitler Youth that opens the track. And I found the original song on YouTube that samples this, which is listed as Hitler Jugend Die Jugend Marschiert. And if you go to genius.com's entry for this song, you can read the written German. And I'm not reading it on this show because it's Nazi propaganda and that's just not happening here. But it's there on genius.com if you actually want to read the printed version of it. But I also did a little digging into the Hitler Jugend, which dates back to 1922, and it received the name Hitler Jugend, Bund Deutscher Arbeiterjugend, which means Hitler Youth League of German Worker Youth, in July of 1926. So around this time, all youth organizations in Germany were banned by 1936, except Hitler Jugend. And it is estimated that around 8 million kids went through Hitler Jugend. And by 1939, 90% of German children were in the Hitler Jugend. And some parents did oppose the regime. So this allowed the party, by banning other youth events, to remove the equation of the critically minded parents and remove their role in raising their own kids. Because whenever the kids were out of the house, they were getting full Nazi indoctrination. And when they were in the home, if their parents were questioning it, that the kids have been out getting these messages in public life. And then if they were having those views questioned within the home, it would obviously create some strife within the family. So
Right.
I spent a pretty ridiculous amount of time watching old black and white videos of Hitler Jugend film footage, and it's really striking and stark, and it really just gave me chills watching it. And also, like, inside the booklet for Potemkin City Limits, there's a quote from Orson Scott Card's Ender's Game. And the quote reads, "Children are a perpetual, self-renewing underclass, helpless to escape from the decisions of adults until they become adults themselves." And that's such an interesting quote. Like, this speaks to me as one of the song's core premises, that no matter how much you try to educate your kiddos, there are subversive forces at work all around them every day. And it really just goes to show the limited nature of how parents are involved in shaping the views and world perceptions of their own children. It's just a tiny fraction that we parents get to do with regards to how our children turn out. There's so many forces and external variables at play that we're, kind of limited in our abilities as parents in what we're able to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, damned if you do, damned if you don't comes to mind again.
Yeah, it's really tough. But, leading up to this episode, I was also curious to see some old live versions of this tune.
Oh, right,
and
yeah.
So I have seen Propaganda play this song. I saw them play it at the Creepy Crawl in St. Louis in 2007, whenever Beeve was in his early years with the band. And there's a great Propaganda live version of this tune at the Sydney Mosh Cam video on YouTube, which we've referenced many times on the show. And that was also released on vinyl as a bootleg, which I have and actually sounds pretty good.
Nice.
And I went through an embarrassing amount of set lists over at setlist.fm because I realized that in all the recent set lists I've seen of the band, this song is not on there. And so I went back through time on setlist.fm, and I didn't go through every set list, but the most recent set I can find with the Jugend in the show's set list is at the Glass House in Pomona, California on May 29th, 2009.
Oh, wow.
So as far as I can tell, Propaganda has not played this song in a really, really long time. And interestingly, this song doesn't even appear on every show set list on that tour. So like the shows on that tour that are listed on setlist.fm shows this as the only show on the tour where the band played this particular song. And I'm like, is this even possible? How would you just pull this single random song out in the middle of a tour if it wasn't in the show every night? Because bands tend to stick with what they really have dialed in because you want to give the fans the best experience.
Yeah, but practice and rehearsed.
Yeah, totally. So the band goes on a tour and just pulls this out on a single date. It was just odd. So Chris posted a little chat about this song's incredibly difficult vocal performance. In 2021, he's been practicing this. He wrote about it on his Patreon, saying that he's been singing this song just to kind of keep himself in singing shape. And he said they haven't played this song in standard tuning since 2006, and it's still incredibly hard to get through, even tuned down to a more comfortable register for him. But man, if you watch this song performed live on that Mosh Cam video, you can see just how hard this song is to sing, even though Chris makes it look pretty easy. He seems to be the first one to say how incredibly taxing this song is to actually perform. And if you hear on the record, I mean, it's totally obvious how hard this song would be to sing.
I mean, the first part that comes to mind, Greg, is, the children already belong. That part
Seriously.
where he really belts that out.
Soaring.
That was playing in my head as you were describing that.
Such a soaring vocal. This song is full of moments like that. This record is full of moments like that. But this is a really, really impressive vocal performance and such a standalone record for Chris as far as the way the vocals sound. No other records sound like Potemkin for the singing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why it's such a fan favorite with so many people. Well, Greg, let's get to the guest. Who did you talk to about Die Jugend Marschiert?
So, as everybody out there knows, I'm a big fan of podcasters supporting podcasters. I think that this is such a cool little niche community. And I love having people who host other shows on this show. So, um, and a friend that I've made since this show began, his name is Mikey Elfers. And Mikey is the guest on this episode. And he is the host of an interview show called Who's Zoomin' Who, which is on the That's Good Enough for Me online punk zine. And Mikey's show over there is wonderful. And he has had tons of great interviews over there, notably with Todd and Sue Lynn, who were on the show with Mikey at the same time. So he does an interview with Sue Lynn and Todd together, which is great fun. Because I think it was their first thing that they had done together after months of, pandemic isolation. So like seeing Sue Lynn and Todd together on Mikey's show, I think that was the first time that Todd and Sue Lynn had sort of like hung out in a while. So it was a really great interview. And so I invited Mikey on originally because I saw that he did an awesome drum cover on his Instagram for This Is Your Life. And so I asked him, I was like, oh, you want to be on the This Is Your Life episode? Because this drum cover is so rad. And he goes, actually, I'm a huge lifelong video game fan, and I'd love to come and talk about America's Army, Jugend Marschiert. So Mikey Elfers is here on the show, and you can check out his show at that'sgoodenoughforme.com. And you can also find him on Instagram at Mikey Elfers. So enjoy my chat with Mikey Elfers on Jugend Marschiert, America's Army.
I got Sue Lynn and Todd because I messaged everybody in the band individually on Instagram, and they all read the message. And I'm sure this has happened to you too.
Yeah.
They all read the message. Nobody responded. And that's okay. These people are fucking busy. They get messages from all sorts of weirdos. Lately, and maybe this will help you, anytime it's like a personal call like that, at the very end, I just say like, hey, if I'm lame and this is like a publicist, that's fine. But I can't just not try because I'm doing it myself. This is DIY. This is how I'm getting in contact with people.
Yep.
Is by, annoying. Like I sent Smelly one at his surfboard company.
Yeah.
Read nothing. I was like, I understand.
Yeah.
However, I did that This Is Your Life cover, and then Todd shared it to Propagandi's official Instagram account. So I was like, all right, this is super cheap, but I sent them one more message and I said, I just want to let you know how much it meant to me that you posted that video of me playing drums. I got to ask one more time if you'll do a Zoom with me. And they said yes. So
nice.
I was able to get it rolling. I didn't really know what to expect, especially because I kind of weaseled my way into it.
Yeah.
But wow, just the sweetest two people, Sue Lynn and Todd.
Absolutely. My big person who did the read but not respond was Dennis from Refused. I reached out to Dennis and I asked him if he would do a propaganda related interview. Seen no respond, but it's okay because he's Dennis from Refused and he can do it.
Yeah. No, and I have had a few. It's funny, and I was talking about my boss. I was talking to my boss about this too. I'm an IT liaison at a software development company. And I realized during COVID that we just have like IM chat now, right? Because I used to sit right over by my boss. But I learned recently, if I ask my boss a question and he answers over chat with like 2 words, and then I don't hear from him for 2 days, it's bringing me back to these complexes I had in high school where like I was on MSN Messenger and I thought my crush hated me. And it was just because nobody knew how to communicate on chat very well.
Yeah.
So I keep telling myself how often I get a message from somebody, especially on Facebook.
Yeah.
And I say, you know what, I'm going to be on my desktop for 4 hours later tonight. I'm going to respond to this then so I can make it meaningful and actually think about what I'm typing instead of just like heart reacting or something. And then 3 days go by and I don't respond to it. And then I get buried in something else. And then I realize that I'm treating them exactly the same way that I feel like I'm being treated by people that read a message and don't respond.
Yeah. It's the plight of doing a show like this. I try to respond to as many Instagram and Twitter DMs as I possibly can. And I try to respond to them thoughtfully. And it does get to be a bit overwhelming, but I love hearing from people. It's amazing to know that people actually care about what you're doing. You know what I mean? It feels pretty good.
Oh, of course. And just to kind of step back to the propaganda one, Chris Sulin and Todd had seen all of the messages then that proceeded, where it was like, thank you so much, let's do it this night, let's do it this time. So I'm making questions, and I have a lot that have been on my mind forever. On Who's Zooming Who, I try to make it a point to ask questions. I asked Millencolin a question where the guitar player was like, that's a good question. That's a nerdy question. I asked him why a B-side from Home didn't make it on the record, because I think that it was good enough to make it, right?
Yeah.
And he said, well, actually, I wrote that song, and Nikolai and I got in a big fight about it or something. So I'm trying to come up with my super nerdcore propaganda questions, still maybe under the impression that maybe Chris is going to be on it, maybe Jordy's going to be on it. And I never know what to expect. I have people back out at the last second. I have an entire band jump in at the last second. So I never really know. So Sulin and Todd came on. Jeff from That's Good Enough for Me, he's joined me for almost all the Zooms. He texted me at the last second. It's like, I can't do it. My kid's sick or something. So I'm like, all right, here I am by myself with propaganda. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I looked at my questions. I wanted to talk to them about Contest Song from Where Quantity is Job Number One. It was my first question. And I said, well, neither of you were even remotely in the band yet. But it ended up being cool because I realized they were fans of propaganda long before they were ever in it. So we were able to talk about some pretty vintage propaganda stuff, and it wasn't strange.
Yeah, no, your interview was absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
And I loved it. You know, I'm a super fan of this band, clearly. And so whenever I see things like today, I was listening to an interview that Chris did with John K. Sampson on the Escape Velocity radio podcast in like 2012, where they were talking about the First Nations activism group Idle No More. And I was like, here's John and Chris talking to each other for this interview like years after John was out of the band, and it was a great conversation. I just thought that was so cool that those guys like get together and like hang out, even if it's just for an interview over the phone every now and then when they talk about stuff they believe in, because it's all about like, you know, so many higher callings. Does that make sense?
Of course. And we've all talked about the moment the propaganda sound changed significantly to more thrashy, and everybody has their own opinion about it. But, and I've said this in previous interviews, but I wasn't surprised by it at all. And I wasn't upset. I saw John Sampson go his own way, and I was like, that makes perfect sense.
Of course. And
then I had, Stand Up and Be Counted cover. I'm trying to think of some of the other really deep cut Quantity for His Job Number One, B-sides, and a few others, where you knew that they were headed that way. Like, you knew that they wanted to be thrash, and that they weren't necessarily being held back by John Sampson, but he was playing little dinky bass parts and singing with his little dinky voice, which I adore. Winter Wheat is maybe one of the best records that's come out in the last 5 years.
Yep.
But yeah, it's sometimes when musicians are really good friends and really good people kind of go separate ways, and it's not under any sort of shitty circumstances. I think John was just like, I'm going to go continue to do this adorable thing that I'm able to do, and I want you guys to do the thing that you've always wanted to do, which is to get heavy and get Todd in there. And
absolutely.
So when Empires came out, I was in high school. I had some friends that were pretty upset about it, and it's like, then go listen to Less Talk More Rock. Like, it's still there.
Yeah, it exists.
And since then, and I mentioned this to Sulin and Todd, I think Zucosis is a very good example of borrowing Resisting to Be a Man, or even some of John Sampson's like really melancholy poppy pop punk guitar riffs and stuff. There's plenty of moments on propaganda songs that kind of honor the older poppier sound. I think you just have to look for them.
Yeah, well, and I think that Victory Lap is a record that almost like circles back across the entire spectrum of sounds that Propaganda has, performed over the course of their career. I feel like it's such a great arc record. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree 100%. And when what the hell is the song called? The first single that came out with the music video.
Oh, Failed Imagineer.
Yeah. I mean, when that came out, I mean, god damn.
Yeah.
The video, and it was, and like, I mean, we're like, I told Todd this. I somehow missed the mark on all the like YouTube featurettes that associated with failed states. Where they would the whole band's in the room and they would play a whole song 3 times in a row and put it on YouTube. Like, I think I was touring pretty heavily at that time, and so I didn't have time to like just like sit on YouTube, or maybe my phone wasn't as smart. But I said, we saw Sulin's audition video, and I was really hoping that the same thing was going to happen, that there was going to be this transparency. And I liked Todd's response. He said, as a fan of a band, I like that you think that we have some sort of formula or some sort of idea, but it's more like, he said, I rode my bike to practice and I'm sweaty as fuck. And Chris shows up with a tripod and he's like, we're going to videotape practice tonight. And he's like, I don't really want to because I'm really sweaty. And he's like, no, we're going to put it on YouTube. And that's why that failed state stuff exists, because Chris just kind of had that idea at the moment.
Oh my God. And it sounded so good too. When they were doing that status update video with Beef in the room, and they were all just like back there just being super serious.
Yeah.
I loved it. Okay, well, let's get into a little bit of Potemkin here. When I wrote to you, I initially wanted you to be on the guest for This Is Your Life, because I did see your drum cover video where you were going so hard on that song. But when I put the full list of songs available to you, you picked Die Jugend Marschiert from Potemkin City Limits as the song that you would like to talk about. And, there's a subtitle to that song, America's Army, that some people call it, and some people call it Die Jugend Marschiert. It's called both on Propaganda's website. But I'm curious about Potemkin as a big picture record to you. Like, what does that album as a whole product sort of like mean in the course of your life? Like, where does it fall in the course of your life? Like, tell me about some takeaways from Potemkin as a product.
Well, for starters, I was an adult when Potemkin came out. I was a senior in high school when Empires came out, right? So I had my ideas about how it worked, but politically minded, I didn't know shit. I didn't know anything. I think I applied for a job as a phone activist, and they were like, are you more liberal or more conservative? And I remember I had to think of the South Park characters. I was like, hippie liberal douche. I was like, yeah. And I was on the right side of history, mind you.
Yeah.
I love all races and genders, and I think that everybody should marry whoever they want, and I think women should have access to abortion, and like, I've always been on the right side, but I was ignorant in the fact that I didn't know what anything was called. I knew a little bit about legislation and stuff like that, but not farther off than School of Rock. But
yeah,
Schoolhouse Rock. So I just knew a lot more about the way the world worked by that point. I listened to Empires in my parents' basement, and I listened to Potemkin in a tour van, on repeat. And I can mention the bridge on this particular song, in which you're going to say the title of it again.
Die Jugend Marschiert.
Thank you. I'll just cue you every time I need.
That's fine. I'll do it every time.
Or I'm going to say it in Nebraskan. Die Jugend Gesundheit.
Oh God.
But I think the beautiful opening of the bridge on that song is when the acoustic guitar rolls in.
Oh yeah.
There's a little bit of kind of Boys of Summer to the guitar. That was one of the first times that I was, as a huge fan of the fact that Chris Hanna could play these crazy guitar parts and sing at the same time and hold it all down by himself. It was one of those first times where I'm like, fuck, he's got to get another guitar player.
Interesting.
And I heard that that's just one song. There's a lot of great examples on that record where Chris was just still doing Chris, but there's a few moments where for the first time it was like, there's absolutely no way that he can sing and play this and play that second guitar part at the same time. And I think these two guitar parts are finally valuable enough that they're both necessary when they play this live. And so I wasn't surprised by Beeve at all. And I like that they just kind of snuck him in there.
Yeah.
And he fit perfectly. And of course, many albums later, I had to compliment Celine, and I've noticed different circumstances where they're both playing different parts on maybe an older song, like Fuck the Border. And then at one point you look and they're the same guitar player for a second.
Mm.
And as an egotistical douche that plays guitar that would like kill myself to play with Propagandhi, I don't know how Celine has that kind of restraint. And it benefits a band very well.
Awesome. Well, why did you choose Die Jugend Marschiert to talk about out of the song list that I sent over to you?
I had a couple others where I was like, that one.
Yeah. What were the ones that you were kind of swirling around in your head?
I said supporting cast.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, all right, what am I going to say about this? I was like, fucking rips.
Yeah, it's shreds, man.
I was like, it's shreds, guitar part, the drums. I think supporting cast is my favorite Propagandhi record.
Same.
And then I realized that would have been the end of the interview. And then I realized I was like, oh, Leg Hold Trap. I could talk about that song for a long time because of just where John Sampson fits in my heart musically, to the fact that, I read a lot about Fat Mike not liking that song, kicking that song from the record. I think he said that John sings like a weenie on it or something. To the fact that I didn't know that the recording of that song existed until the reissue of How to Clean Everything. All I had was this live version on Quantity as Job Number 1, where Samson's drunk and he's singing like just complete shit. He's terrible.
I got the CD version right here.
There you go.
And I have 2 copies of the double 7-inch over there on the shelf.
Sweet. So there's a part in that live recording where Chris is like, John, what are you doing? And he's just making like it sounds like he's making fun of the song. And so, being a high schooler in 2001, I was on Napster every minute trying to find this Toothpick Hercules band that wrote the original version. However, I looked at your song list and I said, well, Leg Hold Trap's only going to get like 3 views, right? I kind of need more attention than that.
Yeah.
So really what I ended up with was a song that I really liked and a song that I felt like I could probably have the most to reflect on. And America's Army.
There you go.
I think would tie easily with Rock for Sustainable Capitalism for me. I had a lot to say about those 2 songs from a guitar player standpoint, a drummer standpoint, a songwriter standpoint, and just kind of where I was at politically in my life.
Let's dive into the music then. I am definitely curious, since you're a multi-instrumentalist, proficient in all of these instruments, drums, bass, guitar, about the musical performance on this particular song and how it stands out to you. What do Chris, Jordan, Todd do on this song that impress you? About the musical performance of the instruments, maybe the vocal delivery, anything like that. We'll get into the lyrics in a little bit.
Okay. I think that the first, we'll just start at the beginning. We got this creepy ass German children's sing-along thing.
Yeah, I found the original today and listened to the whole thing, and I was like, oh God, like I had like shivers down my spine. And
I mean, especially right now with everything that's going on, things like that have always been eerie for me. I was kind of raised with a rich understanding of the Holocaust and how terrible it is, which it's asinine that people are saying that it's like a hoax now.
Mm-hmm.
That's how like idiotic our society has gone. So, when I've been listening to the song to prepare for this interview, I've been hearing that intro and it's been making me feel really guilty about like drinking rosé with my wife and playing Mario Kart on Friday night while there's like women in cages being like mass hysterectomy and stuff like that. Like, and that's what that little nursery rhyme makes me think of. It's like these happy children, everything's great, right? Fuck that. So, the juxtaposition obviously to that eeriness, the song rips open. I'm not sure if it's the first time that Geordie did this in a song, but every time a measure starts over, he does a drum roll that overlaps into the next one. So it goes digga 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 digga,
Yeah.
and that fill overlaps. Chris leaves it open, and Chris comes in a little late to accompany that, which it's something that you'll find in a lot of Propaganda songs if you dig over the last 15 years. But at the time, it was one of the first times I had ever heard any band do that.
Mm.
Potemkin's interesting for me too, because at the time it was the highest sonic quality that Propaganda had had. However, it's the last record that Propaganda did where Geordie's drums weren't like digitally fixed at the end.
Mm.
And this isn't a rip on Geordie. This is just the way that people record music now.
Sure.
And have been. So from supporting cast and on, you would have the drummer go in and record the record, and then you go into Pro Tools and you just kind of fix everything.
Mm.
It's kind of like auto-tune, but you just move the kick so it's perfect. And Geordie's a human being, just like everybody else. So it's interesting because, and I've been back and forth with this as a drummer and as a music fan on things like rhythm correction and auto-tune. I've always been a big fan of it. I think if a singer's like the teensiest bit flat and he's singing about something really important and you fix that note, just a tiny little
Yeah.
then it makes it sound perfect. And Geordie's always been one of my favorite drummers. He's always been a huge inspiration. So it's fun hearing raw Geordie. And if anybody thinks that I'm like made up to the bone tracks from Victory Lap that got released on Spotify, listen to the snares and kicks and just kind of focus on it, and you can tell that it sounds more like Potemkin than anything that they've put out since then, because it's just the raw drums. Nothing's moved around or scooched or replaced or whatever techniques they used. Again, I'm a huge fan of everything this band has done, so I'm not being critical. But I remember hearing this song for the first time, and Geordie's just fucking wailing.
Mm-hmm.
We reached the bridge, and it quiets down, but he's playing, and this was a drum beat that everybody was obsessed with this summer. I remember it.
Yeah. It's very like comprehensive guide, good riddance style, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's just Paranoid by Black Sabbath.
Yeah, for sure.
During that period of time, and different drummers could do it really fast and other drummers, but everybody added that beat to their repertoire. And I was super excited to hear Geordie's spin on it, because he's not going to do it like everybody else. Yeah, and then the song just rips apart at the end. Fantastic.
I love it. What did you think of the vocal delivery on Potemkin? Because it's so unique as far as the catalog goes.
I think Chris was really pushing his limits around that time. I think he really wanted to say, he wanted to see how high he could sing.
Mm.
And I think Sustainable Capitalism and America's Army,
Jugend Marschiert.
I think that these are two songs where you hear that high note, and I was gonna map it out on my Fruity Loops and find out exactly what the note was, but I'm not, I guess, that much of a nerd. But the high note that he hits on the bridge, I think I know, that's his high note, and you hear that high note all over their catalog now. When I hear it, I'm like, there's a Chris Hanna high note. Hell yeah.
Nice.
As far as the presentation of the song, I had the lyrics in front of me, and it's one of those, I'm so happy that they did this. It's just an essay. You know what I mean? It's just a flyer for this economic and manpower analysis office, and it's written the way you would see it on a brochure. And this is really where I became a fan of what Propaganda was doing as a kid, and it just went full bore. Was when Empires came out, and I'm learning about COINTELPRO. The lyrics on their website are just an essay, and Chris is just playing impossible guitar parts and stuffing the words to this essay in however he can to make it fit the song.
Yep. I mean, it's such a unique way of singing over music. And like I've talked about this, I think on several other episodes of the way that, he'll drop out in the middle of a sentence and then he'll come back in, several seconds later, often in the middle of that same sentence, but he had a musical part to go through before he brings these two lines back together. I mean, it's pretty wild.
And that's what punk rock is, right? I can't tell you how many times somebody probably tried to do something like that, and their guitar player leaned over and was like, "You can't do that. That's not the way you write a song." And fortunately, for the sake of the four in Propaganda, it's like, "Fuck you. I'm going to do it this way."
Yeah.
And I really enjoy. They don't do it as often anymore, right? So when you do see a song written that way, and Chris stops off in the middle of a sentence to go play a lead, you're like, it's going to be one of these songs, and it's an exciting thing.
So I'm curious about the lyrics and the ideas in the song and what they mean to you. Do you have any like particular favorite lines or anything, or the way the song is put together as like, this slow build of like being almost like a campus tour of, hi, I'm your tour guide, and then having a speech in front of people and then like telling the dirtiest secrets? Like there's this plot that plays out, and there are so many good lines. I'm curious if you have any favorite moments in the tune lyrically.
Well, "Oops, Did I Say That Out Loud" is an incredible moment of the song. I mean, it's a crescendo of sorts that continues to expand.
It's almost like a moment where like you accidentally tell Bob Woodward something. You know what I mean? And like, oh, I wasn't supposed to say that part.
Yeah. And that kind of takes you back to what I said about that eerie Nazi song at the beginning, right? Is like, it's so easy to think that you're a part of. There's idiotic people right now that think that they're a part of Trump's America, that actually think they're doing something good.
I know a lot of them.
Yeah, same here. Midwest represent.
Mm-hmm.
But and it's it's easy to call them racists and idiots or sexist, but at the same time, you feel really bad for these people. There were people in Nazi Germany. There are kids in Nazi Germany that were like, police are heroes. I'm gonna go help out or whatever. Just like that fucking kid that shot that protester. That kid thought he was doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it just kind of goes to show, if you broadcast the same message over and over again to ignorant and I guess easily influenced people, you can kind of trick them into supporting some pretty nasty shit.
The amount of manipulation that goes on behind the scenes to get us to see with rose-colored glasses things that are actually quite violent, it's bewildering to me. And you and I are both raising children right now. You may have been a video gamer at one point in your life. I don't know if you ever like lived in the dorms or something and like played Xbox as much as me, but the amount of like things that infiltrate and frame our view based on the media that we consume over the course of our lives, especially during our formative years, is really wild. And here you have this song about this video game, America's Army, that was actually put out by the U.S. military. It's like a first-person shooter game that was developed by the U.S. Army and intended to, educate and recruit prospective soldiers on a very realistic idea of what life was like inside the military. It's it's a way to frame it to where it excites us and it gets our dopamines up in our brain and get us excited about it. But it's like this programming that happens against our will, and it almost is like a bookend with Dear Coach's Corner as well, where you see the military repel and the people cheer. It's almost like a complimentary piece of like that to me. And then you see things like the Patriotic Education Initiative coming out of the White House this week is like a tool of thought policing that not everybody has the ability to disentangle themselves from. Like sometimes these things come at us and we don't know they're coming at us, and then all of a sudden we have this view that we don't know why we hold. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And you can't see it on my camera here because it's on the wall facing right there, but I have 1,750 video games.
Hmm.
So I'm not going to say that that Mortal Kombat is teaching people how to kill people or anything like that. However, I've had this kind of theory about like Call of Duty games and shit like that, and I'm not going to go as far as to say that the U.S. government is funding these games to try to train soldiers or anything like that. But I will say this, the guy that posted he shot up a mosque and he videotaped the whole thing. Happened like last year, I think, in a horrible event. I saw some screenshots of his video, right? I'm not going to watch the video, but it looked like Call of Duty. It was just like point of view, like rifle. It was just like, this looks exactly, and like video games are so realistic now that the Call of Duty ones and stuff, it's not a stretch, it's not a stretch that the military could be like, you like Call of Duty, kid? Would you like to do it in real life? And in fact, I think I saw an advertisement for the Army that kind of, it looked like these guys were in a video game, and then it like took them out, and they were actually, I don't remember how they spun it. They were helping children cross the street or something. They didn't go as far as to like promote the combat side of things. But for me, it was, especially, I graduated in 2002. So a whole bunch of my graduating class, we had to stand in front of our like, it was called I don't know, some city council, all the rich business owners in town, city of commerce, and we had to say what we were going to be when we grew up. It was like 3 months before graduation. 9/11 had just happened, right?
Yeah.
So I remember a couple little pipsqueak kids that I used to be friends with that like, I went up there and like did a bow, or like, I was so immature when I was a little kid. And I was like, I'm moving to Lincoln. Everybody like laughed, and then I remember a bunch of old at me because I wasn't going to college or anything. But I remember a couple of kids going up there. This one kid in particular, this really skinny kid, he got up and he was shaking, I think because he had to talk, like publicly speak, and he didn't really want to do that. But he kept looking down, he kept looking up, and I finally noticed that his dad was in the back of the room standing up in his chair, like just like, and the kid like read this kind of canned speech. He was like, due to the events of September 11th, I'll be enlisting in the military. And then he just like put his head down and walked off. That's the same type of influence, man. Like his dad was like, are you a patriot, or are you like this douchebag kid that's moving to Lincoln? And, a lot of those kids saw some terrible shit. And I don't think that they really knew what they were getting in. I don't think that they really knew the gravity of it. Growing up in a small town and hearing from their dad, who, watches high school football games, how important it was for them to enlist at that time.
Yeah. Did you ever consider going that route in your life?
No, absolutely not.
I didn't either.
To the point that, a recruiter called my house my senior year, and I fucked with him. And then he called back and demanded to talk to my dad, and then I think my dad fucked with him, right?
Oh.
Because I was like, no, I think the Army's dumb. And he was just like, have you ever done anything for yourself in your life or something? But that fast forwards to Potemkin, right? The summer that this came out, that was the summer where if you were in a band, and I did this in St. Louis, and Kansas City, Denver, Chicago, if you were in a band and you were on tour in the summertime, as long as you had skinny jeans, a carabiner, and a trucker hat, you could get into every Warped Tour for free. Oh, you had to have a tour van too. Well, all you had to do was just go park with the other bands and hop out of your van and carry a case of merch with you, and you could just hawk CDs. We just give them away. We just give them away and like, hey, go to our website. Like, you have $1, like we'll get you a CD. So I was doing that at those Warped Tours. That summer I got to see Vandals 3 days in a row with 3 different drummers.
Nice.
I saw him with Derek from Alkaline Trio, Brooks, and I saw him with Josh Freese. And I don't remember which city was what. But in between watching all these amazing bands, some of which really mixed up their sets 3 or 4 days in a row, which was a treat, especially for my broke ass sneaking in a Warped Tour. But I got approached by an Army recruitment guy that wanted me to sign up for the military. And if I signed up to be in the military, I had a chance of winning a Story of the Year autographed guitar. And I was like, you're a fucking antichrist, man.
Oh my God.
Like, you're going to convince some little squeaky 17-year-old kid to sign up for the military so they can like meet one of their music idols, like guitars. Like, I don't know.
It's gross. And I remember seeing International Noise Conspiracy at Warped Tour one year, and they were playing on a stage that was directly across from a military recruitment tent. And I just watched Dennis yell and scream. It's so funny that Dennis has come up twice in this interview.
Yeah, that's great.
He just yelled and screamed about the military recruitment tent that was right across from his stage and how ridiculous it was that he had to play across from that tent the entire set. I mean, it was a really important moment for me, though, to see people publicly critiquing things in a way that allowed me to break out of my suburban St. Louis mentality of, growing up in a military family,
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, fortunately, my parents were earthy hippie people when they were younger. So it was never even an issue for me. However, yeah, I'll never forget that moment. I was on tour, right? And I was like 19. So I was invincible.
Yeah.
I wasn't wearing a seatbelt. I wasn't doing anything safe. I wasn't eating well. I was drinking too much. And yeah, there were some military guys, I think, that were in the National Guard or whatever, that were just kind of hanging out by this guy's tent because they felt like they needed to because they were military.
Mm.
And yeah, one of them like called me a pussy bitch as I was walking away.
It's like, well, and another thing is like that really gets to me is the defensiveness of like somebody in the military would say something to you at a Warped Tour, like, "Oh, hey kid, you ever done anything for yourself?" But you're on the phone with them, and then you're just like, "Oh, come on, man! Like I'm just trying to eat my dinner, and like I have school tomorrow." And then, so it's a guilt trippy thing. But then the second you push back on it, it's a very defensive reaction of, "Oh, you've never done anything in your life. How would you even know?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a mind game. It's a manipulation tool to make you think like, wow, this person doesn't think I'm important unless I do this thing that will make me important. So it's a way to conflate your own ego and your own self-importance to feel like you're doing something that matters and serving and all this stuff and these buzzwords. And then before you know it, you are in Fallujah,
Yeah, and I have a ton of close friends that are veterans, and I'm sure as hell happy that they did some of the things that they did. However, they're not assholes. And a lot of them wish that they didn't have to see and do some of the things that they did. But I don't know. We're living, America as a whole now is like, thank you for buying your cat food. Would you like to donate money to something? I'm required to say this or I'm going to lose my job as a cashier.
Yep.
After you say no to that, and again, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to say one more thing to try to get you to donate this thing to this thing, or I'm going to lose my job as a cashier.
Yep.
This is the only job I have, right? And then that cashier is completely shit on by some Karen that's like, I said no. And it's like, all right, so the company's being a dick. This customer's being a dick. This poor kid's trying to work, at a pet store. That's what America is right now. It's like entitled dickheads being selfish and everybody else making GoFundMes to pay for everybody else's cancers because the rest of the United States is so fucked.
Oh my God, this is depressing. I hear you, man. I was reading an article today. I dug around a little bit on some articles from the early 2000s on America's Army, this video game created at the Office of Economic and Manpower Analyses and spearheaded by Colonel Casey Wardynski. And, I found a quote today from a teenager in this article from 2002 in the Christian Science Monitor that says, "I would definitely consider giving my skills to the Army," says the short-haired blonde as he plays through a simulated battle scene. "But if nothing else, when I get back, I'll go to the website and download the game and play it just for fun." And I'm like, there it is, man. It's like if you can get this chunk of people into this large organization based on this video game, then it has been worth your economic impact to create the game in the first place because you're luring bodies into the larger system that they are now becoming a part of. It's so much. It's so much.
Yeah. And then just and then disenfranchise them, push them down into the lower class, and then tell them it's Barack Obama's fault.
Yeah, it's really easy to scapegoat other people.
I'd like to see a video game that the military makes that teaches you how to care for other people, especially how to care for veterans that come home from war.
Yeah. Well, and if anybody's listening to this out there, you included, Mikey, I mean, I would definitely go on YouTube and encourage you to watch some of the YouTube, like Twitch streams and stuff like that of people playing this game, America's Army. There are several different iterations of the game now that have been released over the years. And you can watch people do playthroughs of them on YouTube, and you can watch people get shot, and you can watch them bandage wounds like on the battlefield, and you can watch them do risk assessment of if it's safe to go out and treat a downed fellow soldier's injuries that when they've been shot out in like the middle of a battlefield. And like there's so much that goes a part of it. And I was watching some of these videos today, and I was just like, man, this is a recruitment tool to get people to go into these actual situations to see, can these folks see themselves personally doing the things that are being depicted on the screen? And it's surreal to me to think about.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with rock and roll racing.
There you go. Well, Mikey, this has been a really fantastic evening hanging out with you. Do you have any other closing remarks about Die Jugend Marschiert or propaganda in like the grand scheme of your life or anything?
I'm just excited that they're continuing to do things.
Yeah.
One of the things Todd had a conversation with me about how he very poorly organizes this when he comes with them. And how when they're finally writing a record, he has to go through and like pool into these tapes of different guitar riffs. And the way that he put it gave me anxiety thinking about dealing with it that way myself. But it was just like, these guys can do this forever.
Yeah.
And say what you will about any punk band that's been around since the 80s that's still doing it. I just watched NoFX play White Trash.
Yeah, I saw that too.
And it's great. Mike was sober, like
dude, the bag, they sounded great.
Yeah. And it was a little dinky yard show. But that's what growing older is kind of giving me this, and especially meeting these people and talking about each other's bands and stuff is just it just kind of shows how small and connected the punk universe is. Maybe it wasn't always this way, but I think it's pretty obvious nowadays. Just when some kind and good fucking talented people are working together, and you can take Propaganda's entire discography and feel that way about it. So yeah.
Awesome. Well,
thank you
Mikey,
for writing a great song.
Heck yeah. Well, Mikey, where can people find you if they want to follow you and find some of your work?
My Instagram's @Mikey Elfers, ELFERS. Otherwise, you can go to consumeoil.com. That'll take you towards, I think it's just a music video right now. Thirst Things First is my baby. It's my little space punk band. The Killigans are on Spotify and shit. I've done one record with them, and we're writing another one right now. Otherwise, go to that'sgoodenough4me.com. And I got to interview Less Than Jake, Lynn Lay from Bad Cop this week, along with having the pleasure of talking to you. So it's been a busy week, but I'm super excited about all the content that's about to come out.
Awesome. Well, Mikey, this has been a real great hang. I'm super grateful to you for being stoked on this project that we're doing, and I hope you can keep going on your project as well, because I'm really loving your Hughes Zoom and Who project. It's been a lot of fun to see what you've been doing over on your neck of the woods as well.
Thanks, Greg.
Audio
Alrighty, thank you so much to Mikey Elfers for hanging out with me. Keith, I really dug Mikey's insights on the music for this song because, he is a very proficient drummer, a very proficient guitarist and bassist. And so hearing his thoughts on especially Jord's performance in this song really stands out to me. So it's like, I love having people who think musically, with like performed musical experiences, multi-instrumental understandings of how songs are performed and recorded. And so it's just really awesome to have Mikey on. It kind of reminds me back when we had Ben Murray from Heart Sounds on our episode for Duplicate Keys Acaro, because Ben is such a great drummer and such an awesome guitar player that Mikey kind of like harkened back to that style of interview for me. I was thinking about the music, Keith, for this record, and I have a theory. Can I run this past you?
Oh boy, Greg theory coming at you.
Right. So I love this, right? And the more we listen to this band and the more we talk about it, I start to see these patterns and puzzles that I put together in my head. Mm-hmm. And so I am a sorter and a categorizer, and I think that Potemkin City Limits is the most compartmentalized record in any of all of Propagandy's albums in several ways, right? I see this song as being several EPs within an LP, okay? I see pairings and partnerships of songs and particular sounds in this record in ways that don't appear in other records. So let me break this down for you. You ready for this?
Yeah.
All right, so Potemkin has EPs within the record. And I see this song, Die Jugend Marschiert, as stylistically a part of an EP that would include Speculative Fiction, Rock for Sustainable Capitalism, Die Jugend Marschiert, Name and Address Withheld, and Iteration. So that's a 5-song EP, okay? That is the first one. And this is an EP of songs that I think come from the "and we thought nation states were a bad idea" school of songwriting in Propagandy's sound. Okay. Hilariously, this little batch of songs could stylistically fit with Less Talk, More Rock, but would not fit with anything on Empires. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Even though I know that like a demo of Motor League existed during the Less Talk, More Rock era. But anyway, so that's EP 1, okay? EP 2 from Potemkin City Limits is Cut Into the Earth, Bringer of Greater Things, and Life at Disconnect. So that's a 3-song stylistically similar batch of songs, okay? That would be like a 7-inch, right? With 2 sides. Mm-hmm. Then EP 3 is Fixed Frequencies, Fadala's Hearse, Impending Halfhead, and Super Bowl Patriot 36. To me, these are like 3 EPs within the record. And, think about those: Fixed Frequencies, Fadala's, and Impending Halfhead, and Super Bowl Patriot. 2 Chris songs, 2 Todd songs, wild song styles. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So to me, like, these are these like pairings that I break this record down into. And we've done Sustainable Capitalism and Name and Address. So after this episode for Die Jugend, we'll be partway through of what I see as an EP within the Potemkin City Limits LP. What do you think about my partnerships and pairings?
Well, I think it's funny, Greg, because I had already clustered and linked songs together, sometimes across the band's discography, but especially within this album, within Potemkin, I was more likely to make a bridge between 2 or 3 tracks, like Iteration and Speculative Fiction, and even this, Die Jugend. Then I think I would on Failed States or Today's Empires. I don't know if I really like pieced songs together and saw them as partner or pair tracks. So I think I already did that, but I didn't think about all of the songs. Like I kind of just thought of just like 3 or 4 really fitting together, and then I didn't try to like place where the other ones would go. So I think that's a really cool idea. And like, you've made those playlists, I think I'm going to have to listen to the other ones in order rather than just the album flow to see how they do kind of fit together.
Yeah, like maybe just for fun, I'll do some Spotify playlists of my three Potemkin City Limits EPs that I've sort of concocted in my brain and see if they flow together, because those are stylistically appropriate songs that seem to just speak to each other. To me, I'm like, oh, this one is like that one. This one goes with that one. So like, I'm thinking about like when bands like Protest the Hero would do like a couple of EPs in a year, or when the Bouncing Souls did their 7-inch series leading up to Ghosts on the Boardwalk, and things like that, So I'm seeing these like ways that Propaganda could have packaged this album differently. And this one just stands out to me as one that has a distinct couple of sounds within the record where songs speak to each other. Like I don't feel like I could do this clustering on the other albums, though. Like I feel like it's only Potemkin where I can do this clustering. So there's an alternative version of this song that Chris just posted on his Patreon recently as well, that clocks in at 4 minutes and 20 seconds instead of the 4 minutes and 43-second album version. And it reduces the breakdown part leading into "Did I Just Say That Out Loud?" by a few bars. And it really does make the song progress a bit more. And I think I do like the shorter version more. But holy smokes, Die Jugend Marschiert into Rock for Sustainable Capitalism is an absolutely iconic 9 minutes of Chris Hanna back to back, isn't it?
Yeah, super good. Like just the perhaps contrasting themes, but also the slightly different styles. Especially with what came before in Today's Empires, like those two songs, which didn't really grab me right away when the album first came out, because it was just so different from what I had, heard, just such blazing, blistering punk with Today's Empires. I mean, that was really what I was mostly familiar with, and How to Clean Everything somewhat, but I didn't listen to it a ton by the time this came out. And this is just more mid-tempoed, far more melodic. It was a little jarring for me, again, I wasn't a long-term fan, but it was really, really different. And perhaps without really knowing Less Talk, which this connects with a bit more with like the melodic sensibilities, I kind of had to like familiarize myself with it and grow with it over time. But I agree. I think those two songs really go together.
Yeah. And we've got some drop D guitar on this. I was looking at the Sheet Happens book, and to me, the entire slow middle section is a sort of preview of what we would get more of on supporting cast with Beeve.
Right.
A little more atmospherics, a little more extended compositions. Like, I feel like this is a really good preview of where the band was going next. But like, holy smokes, dude, that riff after Loving Father of Three.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, dude, it's one of my favorite Propaganda moments. And like, this show is called Unscripted Moments. So like, I'm a big fan of moments, right? I'm yes, unsupporting cast, that whispered yes that I'm so obsessed with. But that riff after Loving Father of Three is another one of those favorite Propaganda moments for me, where it just goes into that riff and it is all guns blazing. But like, I was thinking a ton about the vocal performance of this song as well. And way back on episode 3, when Chris Deutsch was here for Copters Out of Frame, we talk about how Chris separates sentences across different sung lines.
Right.
And this is one of those songs where he really leaned super hard into that strategy in like, this is for me, almost like a vocal turning point in a lot of ways. And like, this song really seems hard to sing, but it's in a style where Chris really separates his thoughts on separate lines. So a complete line of lyrics will appear across a space with no vocals. So for me, this song feels very laid on top of something that was really hammered out musically, and then the words were laid upon the finished product, however he could fit them in, which to me is like the only limitation of this song, is that the vocals seem very laid upon a finished musical product. in ways that, could potentially be seen as clunky compared to some of their previous vocal performances, which seem to flow a little better. And we've talked about this on the show in the past, but it has actually been a while to where we discussed a song where it feels quite like the way the lyrics are spaced out in this manner. Like the vocal delivery, if I had one critique of this song, I know we never critique Propaganda on this show, right? Like, I want,
or if we do, we regret it.
I know, like I want to I wish I had more critique to say
Right. No,
on the
I know
show.
what you mean.
And like, I wonder if the band thinks our show is boring because like we talk about how much we love them all the time, but like, the vocal delivery could possibly be seen as a bit too choppy on this one. Like here at our historic pause and sprawling pause, West Point Academy campus. So like, there's like these like completely unified thoughts that are broken up with these like kind of wonky pauses. And that's really the only critique I have to offer, because obviously this is such a great song. But that's like something I was thinking about. I was like, wow, there really is a lot of like vocal line separation, separating complete thoughts within the song to kind of like bogs down the storyline.
Right, Greg. I think this would actually, if I taught music or something like that, like an activity with students, it'd be really fun to just give them the lyrics and then have them set it to music. Like, what would the music be that they would create as a result? And I'm guessing there wouldn't be as much overlap and similarity as you would if I gave them lyrics that were standard chorus verse with like an A-B rhyme scheme. Because where would you really draw the line between like each line or even sections of the song? I mean, it's not necessarily clear. And I do agree. I think parts are unclear because the lyrics are dense. It's a narrative, right? It actually reads like a script, which doesn't necessarily lend itself perhaps to music. So some things get a little jammed in to where even with sitting down and reading the lyrics, there are a few parts to where if I listen to, I actually don't know the words, and I had to go back and listen to, because it's not necessarily as clear as some other tracks. So I agree. I do think that is a limitation, but I guess a limitation that comes at the cost of having such rich, narrative storytelling, which we'll get to in a bit. But I want to circle back to the guitars really quickly.
Sure.
I love the use of palm muting here in like the first more mid-tempo riff. I love that riff that you mentioned that gets way thrashy after Loving Father of Three. There's that really powerful melody that ends up bleeding into a solo where Chris is actually singing at the same time. And that captures, I think, the energy and in a way also like the sadness of this song. Like that's actually one of my favorite parts as well. The breakdown, which you mentioned, has really beautiful picked layered chords. There's the, I guess, accidental Boys of Summer riff, which people always bring up. And I wasn't even like, I was like, wait a second, that sounds like something. And I didn't know the artist and I didn't know the name of the song, but I knew it sounded like something that I heard. And at first, when I first bought this album, it was actually pretty distracting and I don't even hear it anymore. Like if someone said like, oh yeah, you mean the Propaganda Boys of Summer song? Like I probably, before this week, I wouldn't remember that it's this because I've just kind of erased it from my memory.
Yeah.
But I think there's that awesome riff at right where Chris sings the Decades of Bilgewater, and it's that kind of proggy do-do-doom that builds and that changes. There's the melody with Your Children Already Belong to Us. So there are all these amazing parts. And what I kept thinking about too is like, it was just Chris. And I know that Todd plays guitar as well. But what he was able to come up with and create with all of these layers and different sections that, aren't just, like a repeating punk rock structures. You have thrashy elements, you have proggy elements, you have punk elements here. I mean, it's really, really a diverse musical track in terms of guitars. And then, I mean, geez, the drums.
Oh, huge.
It's just like crazy Phil City. There's like unexpected splashes and emphasis. There's just like color and dynamic texture added all throughout the song. That Jord is like this consistent backbone throughout, but then he does things that are unexpected, and I think that was also perhaps a little unfamiliar for me hearing this song first when it was released before the album came out, because Today's Empires was just like so fast, and because I'm not a drummer, I don't pick up the nuance. I don't necessarily pick up the technicality. I just kind of picked up the tempo, and for the tempo to be dialed back, but then there to be so much more happening. I didn't process it then, and I still don't necessarily process it now. I can't really describe what's happening, but I think the drums here are pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and I guess that the drums were recorded by Blair Kalibaba in the first. I know that there were multiple recording sessions for this record, but yeah, it looks like that's where the original went. But then this is a mix and mastering job by Jason Livermore and Bill Stevenson. So it sounds great. But what do you think about? Should we dive into some of these lyrics? I know there's so much to talk about.
Oh, yeah, it's a ton.
It's so obviously my standard caveat for this show is that if you want to learn more about this stuff, listeners have to take it upon themselves to dive into these topics. There's so much happening here, so much like government policy and some stuff that is just beyond us. Should I go ahead and start us off here with this first line?
Yeah, Greg, I'll just add to that I myself feel like I'm only like discovering, like scratching away at the surface of this, that
Absolutely.
Like there are so many more things that I have even more questions about. So like, again, this is not an end point in a conversation. Hopefully this is like the starting point for other people to think about, to read and to explore more. But yeah, what are the first lyrics?
Okay, so we got welcome to the offices of economic and manpower analyses here at our historic and sprawling West Point Academy campus. My name is Mindy. So I love the visual of the overly enthusiastic public relations professional and or student employee who gives tours of campuses to potential students, right? I'm thinking about like my vivid flashbacks of campus tours at Mizzou or Southeast Missouri or Missouri State or Webster University that I did when I was like 18. While thinking about this line, about the person whose actual job it is to show you how great a place is, that you might want to live there and study there and, use this setting as your formative years of education. So I really was like chuckling, thinking back on how I can actually remember what a few of the people who gave me campus tours look like 19 years ago. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, that really is a standout moment when you get these tours of these places, like you remember that person. Because a lot of times they're putting on a big show for you as well. Do you know what I mean? It's like a big act where they like put themselves in character and they take you on this tour and they're always walking in reverse. Do you know what I mean? While talking to the groups. So like so many visuals of tours come back to me whenever I think about this opening line. But West Point, for anybody who doesn't know, is actually here in New York. Where I live. West Point Military Academy is a 4-year federal service academy in West Point, New York. It was originally established as a fort that sits on high ground overlooking the Hudson River. It's very scenic. It's about 50 miles north of New York City. And it's the oldest of the 5 American service academies that educates cadets for commissioning into the U.S. Army. And it was founded in 1802, 1 year after Thomas Jefferson directed that plans be set in motion to establish the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And to get into West Point is like insanely difficult. most applicants get letters of recommendation from members of Congress. So we're talking about the elite of the elite of the elite here.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think about if I were on a tour of, West Point, or if it's a university, at 17 or 18 or 19, I didn't really have the capacities or the facilities to, I think, navigate through the messages, like essentially like the fluff information that is going to make everything look like the best possible experience and option for me at that time. And I think I would probably still struggle in doing that now. So I think just like a facade, right? It very much has this feeling, starting off with like this presentation that's a facade. That's also, I mean, like you said, it's humorous with this either tour guide or PR person named Mindy. Right. I mean, my name is Mindy might be one of the most underrated propaganda lyrics, and I don't mean that sarcastically.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's so great.
It's incredibly sharp and perfect, contrasted against the background, right? Like, I mean, you have like this almost visual of kind of a mousy, petite person set against, the facilities that create and function and carry out warfare. So, I think, like I said, this starts off how propaganda is able to make lyrics that look like an essay or a script, and even I think the format has this feeling that this just is a scene to me. Like this very much dramatically sets a place in time as a specific scene. And as you described West Point, Greg, an institution that is synonymous with power, with prestige, but I also think authority. And Mindy is warming up the audience, I guess, before the guest of honor speech, who's just like you, right? A loving father of three, a parent, a person who's relatable, but hey, he's also willing to support and enforce American geopolitical and economic policies overseas through preemptive and preventative violence, right? So like this song doesn't have as much of that explicit alternative history feel as iteration and speculative fiction. You lump those together in one of your EPs. Yeah. But I think it definitely fits in with those tracks, as the band, to me, seems to be asking, what if politicians and PR people, whomever, actually said the things that they meant? And what if their language didn't obfuscate their intentions? So, I mean, a funny version of this, like, what if there was something for our ears, kind of like Roddy Piper's magic sunglasses in They Live, that allow him to see the aliens and the propaganda that the aliens have kept or have created to make people consume and to make them complacent and passive. And it seems like something has broken here to where people are saying what they shouldn't be saying. Like they're saying the quiet part out loud, as social media likes to say.
I love it. Well, and we got to go back to the Office of Economic and Manpower Analyses. And so I went to the website for this office, right? And it says that they were founded in 1983. And the OEMA is a department of the Army Research Agency, co-located with the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. And the OEMA this is what they say. They describe themselves as a highly expert, multidisciplinary innovation team of soldiers and civilians who teach, publish, and conduct disciplined inquiry to help senior leaders create the army of tomorrow.
What?
This is why the video game exists, the army of tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then they say, in particular, we conduct program evaluation, policy analysis, and problem-solving research to improve existing people programs and to deliver innovative new ones to the Army. So like this entire office is geared around predicting what conflict will be like, it seems like, many years from now. The Army of tomorrow really is the crucial point of, I think, why a video game like America's Army exists. So that's kind of like a little bit about that office. But then you mentioned that line, "It is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to a loving father in 3 and a champion of the sanctioned use of armed force in pursuit of policy objectives." It's always about family values, no matter what. Someone can be a part of a war system that literally destroys humans and families from the face of the earth. But as long as they're packaged and presented as being a family-oriented person, that's what we as a society buy hook, line, and sinker. Do you know what I mean? And like we're constantly, we're doing that. We're just like flipping the script and we're saying, look at this fabulous family person, while not considering the families that have actually been ruined around the world by actions that these alleged family people perpetuate, support, reinforce, maybe outright participate in themselves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld were family men, but that doesn't mean that, like, what does that mean about that phrase anymore? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So we have, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the project director of our newest recruitment strategy, our mission to staff future combat systems through current technology. Without any further ado, I give to you, and it doesn't say the name in the song, but the name in the words is Colonel Casey Wardinsky. So Wardinsky isn't referred to in the sung version, but Wardinsky is the figure that is under discussion here. And Wardinsky graduated from West Point himself in 1980. He did his master's at the Harvard Kennedy School. He did his PhD at Rand. He was a colonel in the U.S. Army until 2010. From 95 to 2010, he was the director at the Office of Economic and Manpower Analyses, which I described earlier. And Wardinsky's jobs at this place reads, prepared economic and policy analysis for senior Army leaders, including the Secretary of the Army, the Vice Chief of Staff, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, and the Deputy Undersecretary of the Army. Analytic products address programs such as recruiting, compensation, retention, talent management, and transformation. Implementation products include strategic recruiting initiatives such as America's Army, the official U.S. Army game, strategic retention programs such as the Officer Career Incentive Program, and enterprise transformation projects such as the use of the America's Army game as an Army enterprise platform for training, education, material development, soft power projection, and outreach. So that's like his own job description in that office, which he headed for 15 years, completely overseeing the development of the America's Army game.
Well, Greg, I'm going to stick with my lowbrow, they live John Carpenter metaphor and say that, well, with this part that you read, Roddy Piper's magic sunglasses, with those, we can see directly the intent, even if the language is very jargon heavy. It's not very clear, but it pretty much spells out the goals of this game, America's Army.
Yeah.
Recruitment, training for future modes of warfare. Notice not preventing, right?
Yeah.
And preventing those things from happening, and manipulating modern technology, which would be gaming, as well as youth culture to bolster the rank and file of the military. I mean, it's spelled out, though it's not necessarily very clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, from 99 to 2010, Wardinsky was in full development mode for America's Army. He was seeking to create a virtual quote unquote test drive of soldiering. And, you know, America's Army, in which over 11 million players have invested 260 million hours of quote unquote soldiering, they call it an adver game. So instead of an advertisement, they call it an adver game. And, you know, what was really fascinating about this is they estimate that it delivers engaging marketing at 10% the cost of traditional methods. So this is a insanely cheap way of getting the messaging out into like the mass markets in a faster and far cheaper way than they were using before. So they do tons of like polling about this, and America's Army players report that they're 26% more likely to include military service in their possible career goals than non-players. And the game's also become an enterprise training and education solution in organizations ranging from special forces to the National Counterterrorism Center. But dude, to me, like the real crux is that advert game phrase. It's creepy because like the tone that we are simply tools and cogs to be advertised to with the hopes that we become part of the military industrial complex. It's dark, man. And, you know, that data about 26% of players being more likely to include the military as a goal, that's wildly specific. And I found out that it's because Wardinsky was a professor of economics at West Point for years and years. So he has a quantitative methods background in data and economics, which practically ensures to me this is why all this data all exists to such a specific degree, is Wardinsky's quantitative methods research background as well.
Right.
So after this, Wardinsky then uses his tech background to become the superintendent of a school district in Alabama after he retired from the Army. And interestingly, he is now simply a partisan opportunist running for Congress in northern Alabama. And I went and I watched some of his advertisements recently for his campaign. And I hit play on one of his videos the other day. And the opening line is, "I fought the swamp when they fought President Trump." And I was like, yawn. Like that's how cynical this dude has become. He can't even come up with an idea of his own for why he wants to be in Congress. It's just straight Trump. And all I hear is boredom when he began speaking. Like, and the second video starts with, "Asked to serve by President Trump." And I'm like,
oof.
Honestly, kind of shocked at how this dude with like a PhD with years of leadership under his belt across so many different professions just like straight up gets on his knees with fealty and weakness and unoriginality. Like literally the second someone starts an ad with another person as their opening line, I can't take this person seriously at all because it shows they have no interest in providing any actual ideas of their own. It's just straight coattails into a $180,000 a year job, you know, and I'd laugh at literally any candidate from any party who starts off their ad by immediately saying another person's name. It's like, cool, if this guy gets into Congress, all we're going to hear about from him is Trump, Trump, Trump. Like I used to tell myself years ago that just because someone had an R next to their name didn't necessarily mean they couldn't have any ideas politically. But now all I hear is when President Trump said XYZ, I heeded his call. And I'm just so bored by these folks. And someone like Wardinsky with decades of experience opens up his ad and says Trump in the first sentence. I'm just like, dude, so dull. So
grifter's gonna grift.
Yeah, you know, and I found an interview with Wardinsky in 2009 on YouTube, which people can find easily, where he talks about his target market as young people and the life of the soldier as first person. And he talks about the Army as our business, like it's a product that you're buying and selling, like you're buying roof shingles. You know what I mean? And he describes his job as helping senior leaders create the Army of the future. He talks about putting content into homes, just like it's like a normal movie on Disney Plus. And he said, gee, if there was some way to package the Army into a virtual experience that you can put on a DVD and get into a household, we could lick an economic problem via intermediation, where there is a group with a message and people looking for information. And then in this video, he goes on to talk about test driving a product with new media, but how the Army isn't test drivable, like a new car, for example. And he goes on to describe the cheap nature of media reuse, where companies make something once and sell it many times. But Wardinsky talks how they want to make it once and use it many times, not just sell it many times, but use it many times, alluding to the free nature of the America's Army game. And he's clearly an extremely intelligent, crafty, thoughtful, well-spoken, very organized person. He discusses the ways the game developers found the Army once the project was like being, developed and designed. But like, it was just a really fascinating interview. And then to know that like 10, 11 years later, he was just going to be Trump, Trump, Trump. I'm just like, whatever, man.
I don't get the mental gymnastics required to call it an advert game and not propaganda, right? Like, this is propaganda. It's not an ad. We're literally just making up words to describe something that already exists. It's called propaganda.
Absolutely. Well, if we think about this next line, there's a warm applause, right? And then he goes, "Thank you. Let me begin with some sentimental appeals to our national myths, assorted cliches coined by the state, the ideological shorthand meant to sweep your private doubts away of this virtual training course, this portal, this Trojan horse that you living idiots paid for and actually rolled into your own kids' rooms." Dude,
man,
what a hilariously dark and comedic lyric. I'm just absolutely blown away by this. It makes me want to go through and compile a list of the assorted cliches coined by the state from folks like Ted Cruz, Vicky Hartzler, Josh Hawley, Mike Pence, Trump, and some of the folks who were around when this tune was released during the Bush administration. So I Googled political cliches.
Oh, no.
And I found a 2012 political article called Very Tired Political Cliches. And here are some of my favorites. Ready? Here's my list. Circular firing squad. Democrats fall in line while Democrats fall in love while Republicans fall in line. Jobs, jobs, jobs. America at a crossroads. It all comes down to turnout. It's the economy, stupid. Drain the swamp. Yes, we can. Build the wall. Axis of evil. The list goes on and on and on, but I just loved it.
Yeah, I have like this flash of terrible phrases from graduation ceremonies, football games, spelling bees and parades, like a 4th of July fireworks show that all start with essentially bumper sticker logic that oversimplify history. They distort reality. I guess, Greg, I would add to that, land of the free because of the brave.
Oh,
freedom isn't free. These colors don't run. As simple as God bless America. Like, those things that we've been told and taught ad nauseum to the point of indoctrination, where questioning any of those things makes you like an apostate. So I'm going to like max out on my misery index lyric quota. But I'll remind listeners that the song Heirs to Thievery by the band was actually got its name from an interview with Chris Hanna that Jason Netherton either read or heard. So, I mean, listen to these lyrics here. This connects a ton. Disseminating myths upon a passive youth. Let's look back upon some long enshrouded truths, where fables often tell of tyrannies undone, as good guys all wear white and wars are always won, right? We're always the hero. We always want simplified ideas or simplified messages. And it's easy to internalize this framing and narrative about democratizing the world or the ends of manifest destiny justifying the means, or the myth of Europeans bringing civilization to a quote unquote backwards continent, that the history of the United States has been a forward march of progress. Like, I think calling out those myths and addressing it to where you're not just challenging it, but you're also exposing it for the propaganda that it is. And, that you mentioned how this is, funny and dark. And I 100% agree, Greg. I mean, that rolled into your own kids' rooms line kind of gives me chills, that everything has a price, everything has a toll and a consequence. And now, how and why we spend time on screens is manipulated and it's monetized without our knowing, without our consent. So, like, I just thinking about this with my own son and the future conversations and the things that I'll want him to be able to enjoy and do, but also knowing the consequences of it. So I looked a little further into the military's use of and manipulation of game design,
Nice.
like before, during, and after America's Army. So I found one game called Full Spectrum Warrior, and it was originally created as an aid to help teach soldiers squad tactics, and a modified version was released for the general public to play. And there's an adaptation of the game being used as therapy for Iraq veterans. I saw something from PBS Frontline that showed how virtual reality of essentially like war simulations is used to treat PTSD. So there's also Full Spectrum Command that was created for higher ranking military officers by the Institute for Creative Technology, but it was never actually released for mainstream gamers like Full Spectrum Warrior was. Before America's Army, there was also Star Wars Ambush, an army training simulation based on Operation Flashpoint, a commercial Cold War-based video game. This was released in 2004, and it was an immersive multiplayer system that allowed service members to practice tactics used against insurgents in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it lets users create and customize new virtual scenarios in the field so that troops on the ground can recreate, share, and discuss incidents they've encountered. And I found this from that same Frontline episode. And then a little bit more information about America's Army. Some writers I came across argued that kind of defensively saying like America's Army isn't the last starfighter. Instead that it's more for communication and recruitment, as if that isn't a problem. And I doubt anyone who really listened to this song or read about America's Army thought that some full bird colonel would show up to a 17-year-old's house for beating some unlockable level in a shoot 'em up game, right? Like no one really believes that's the end result here. But I think that the manipulation, the desensitization, and the recruitment are all glaring problems themselves. I saw something from Captain Brian Stanley, who's the Fresno company commander. He said in regards to gaming and gaming events like LAN parties, so this is like definitely like mid-2000s, he said these events are a way to get kids involved in the concept of teamwork. They can mingle with Army guys, and we can look for the team leader in the squad. If they're interested, they could come talk to us anyway. And one of the most interesting things I read about America's Army was from, I'm not sure if he was a gamer, a hacker, an activist, or all of the above, but Joseph DeLapp. I'm not sure if I'm saying his last name correctly. Listen to this is a write-up of what he did on the game. He describes his work in March 2016 to roughly coincide with the 3rd anniversary of the start of the Iraq conflict. I enter the online U.S. Army recruiting game, America's Army. In order to manually type the name, age, service branch, and date of death of each service person who has died to date in Iraq. The work is essentially a fleeting online memorial to those military personnel who have been killed in this ongoing conflict. My actions are also intended as a cautionary gesture. I enter the game using my login name, Dead in Iraq, and proceed to type the names using the game's text messaging system. I stand in position and I type until I am killed. After death, I hover over my dead avatar's body and continue to type. Upon being reincarnated in the next round, I continue the cycle. And this was as of December 18th of 2011, the official withdrawal date of the last U.S. troops in Iraq. I completed the input of at least 200 plus names into the game for a total of 4,484 names.
Man, there's so much here. It's crazy.
I also learned about what is called the Army Experience Center in Franklin Mills Mall in Philadelphia. I just want to put emphasis there on mall. It's a 14,500 square foot facility that has a number of different gaming and simulation scenarios, like essentially video games, recreated scenarios, and it also hosts gaming events, tournaments with like more modern games, not just those created by the government. And one of the things I saw, Greg, was essentially like, I mean, if you imagine going to an arcade where you have like this standing, like a weapon that you could shoot at the screen, but imagine a Humvee version of that, where there's a Humvee. There are 4 or 5 people in the vehicle. They each have weapons, and they're facing, these massive interactive screens to shoot at things.
Wow. That just totally, I've never even thought about that being a possible video game, but like, of course that exists, right? Of course.
So there's another called game. There's another game, After Ambush, is another Army virtual training simulation, which uses what's called the Virtual Battlespace 2 simulation engine. It was developed from Arma, Armed Assault, a commercial video game, and Army medics could learn to treat combat wounds in a virtual world through tactical field gear trainer. And something I found from Colonel Mark McManigal, he said that the capabilities, he was the capabilities manager for gaming under the Training and Doctrine Command. He said that we're just starting on the tip of the spear of where this is going to go. And this really predicts how gaming and the gamification of the military has evolved in such a short time since this song has released. I mean, like, to us as fans of this song, it feels like so long ago that this album came out. But if you think about like the actual amount of time, it's really not that much. I mean, just after this, in 2008, the Army created a video game unit, and it's set to invest $50 million over 5 years on games and gaming systems designed to prepare soldiers for combat. And the Army gaming unit set out to monitor trends in the industry and identify technology that could be used for future military training. The Army later worked to develop a massively multiplayer online game similar to Second Life. And this was in order to train soldiers for unconventional warfare, such as counterinsurgency operations. The virtual world environment, called asymmetric warfare, is accessible anywhere via an internet connection. And it says that even Iraqi civilians could be recruited to play the role of civilians in the game to heighten the realism if people listening at home are not already sick to their stomachs.
Oh my God. Well, and what's so crazy is like there's no expense that it seems like the military will spare on making sure that they can do absolutely anything that they could ever conceive of in their wildest dreams. Like, they will spend anything, it feels like. And the Trojan horse you living idiots paid for line is so fascinating here, because I'm hearing all these like investments, right? These humongous financial responsibilities. And, the atrocities the U.S. military commit are paid for by all of us, and we're just along for the ride. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can protest to our heart's content on this, but it's totally, a video game is something that's like totally sneaky and subversive, and it's making it free. Really speaks to like the budgeting that families face about getting their kids, like, be like, oh, hey, here's this free thing. And it sneaks it in the back door, man. And it's just because unless you're the most observant parent on the planet, it's pretty hard to tell what your kids get into when you're not looking, you know?
Yeah, and one of the things that really stands out to me the most, Greg, is that this is essentially a feedback loop too. So game designers hire military advisors like Navy SEALs, ex-Navy SEALs, as consultants to make games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare as realistic as possible. Or the fact that like a writer for Call of Duty named Dave Anthony, no relation to our guest, was given a fellowship by the Atlantic Council, a nonpartisan Washington-based think tank that advises on the future of unknown conflict. And this person said, my job is to advise the outside the box thinking on the nature of future threats and propose proactive solutions to mitigate against them. I mean, that could be a lyric to this song. Like, a person who designs video games is advising the military on how to prevent future wars. I'm not a gamer either, Greg. I played my fair share of GoldenEye on Nintendo 64 in high school, maybe a little bit of Halo with my friends in college. And I've not really kept up with gaming. It's just not really my thing. But thinking about this, it makes me pretty ill to think that we can turn America's wars into a cash cow aimed at children who get to invade fictional countries like Urzikstan while not understanding the impact of military occupation. I mean, it's a really sad but perfect metaphor for America and how out of touch it is with its own impact in the world. And even more just like in terms of like a concrete connections. I mean, the US military literally uses video game controllers. The US Navy has Xbox 360 controllers to guide periscopes on nuclear powered warfare submarines. And apparently Lockheed Martin came up with this idea of using commercial hardware like video games on subs. The Army has used Xbox 360 controllers to operate its high energy laser gun, which is built to blast mortar shells and drones. I found a study that suggests that video gamer psychology might be better suited to flying drones. So there was this research done by a forensic psychologist who teamed up with a pilot and an aerospace engineer to test video game to gamers as UAV, as drone pilots, and the report compared game players who had flight simulation experience with general aviation pilots and professional pilots from airlines and the military. And the pilots were subjected to like these different situations where they had to make decisions involving various degrees of danger and risk. And in all the situations, the pilots could rely on automated flight systems. They could fly the aircraft manually. They could choose to do that instead. And professional pilots had the lowest or the best score on the personality factor of neuroticism. This forensic psychologist said if you have a really low score there, then you're more likely to face situations that are stressful. And in that category, gamers outscored general aviation pilots and scored nearly as well as the professionals. So this is all being tapped into. And I think a modern version of this would be the military's use and presence on Twitch. So there's like this manifestation here, I think speaks to how this is still a warning. Like, people can live stream like the U.S. military's gaming. So, I mean, Twitch has had 5 billion hours watched from April through June last year alone. 5 billion hours.
Yeah.
Their advertising pitch boasts that they can reach 80% of male teens in the United States, and you only need to be 13. I found an article from The Nation from Jordan Ewell, who really who took the military to task on its use of Twitch, and how the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, they all stream on Twitch using their esports teams, which is actually only made up of like 10 people. The teams are comprised of gamers who compete in tournaments for cash prizes, While members of military esports teams offer like regular gaming skill set, they're also on-screen talent, and they're also act as recruiters. So they're not just people playing a video game. They're approaching kids at schools. They could chat with them online about their games and then like sneak in information about the military. And Jordan goes on to write that the typical military scream looks something like this. He says, a recruiter, usually a man in his 30s, sits comfortably in a gamer chair inside a dimly lit room illuminated by a monitor with the colorful LED lights of his computer tower. There's an American flag hanging on the wall behind his right shoulder. An oversized stuffed animal sits to his left. He's playing Call of Duty. He's friendly, and he talks about how much he loves being in the military. Despite being older than most of the young viewers, he speaks like them. It do be like that sometimes. We do have some comms, some great comms, said a recruiter in one session, and users were banned from streaming the military Twitch accounts because they kept joining and asking about the U.S. military's history of war crimes. So the military was actually off Twitch for a while because people kept doing that. So like, I mean, this isn't going away. Like, so maybe America's Army, like that game itself, isn't the concern now, right? Now, perhaps it's something like this. It's the access to our children through these streaming services where they can gamify, death, and they can gamify the military in ways that like 13-year-olds aren't going to be able to like question and think about critically, just like someone on a tour of West Point wouldn't be able to question or critically.
Oh my God. And you said something earlier about a fictional place. I think you said Urzikstan, right?
Yeah, that's like a place in a video game.
Okay, so check this out. Think about the message that sends as well, right? If you are a young person in a virtual military exercise and the target setting is a place called Urzikstan, and then you start studying world geography and you see other countries with that ending "stan" on the end, what is your immediate judgment about that place going to be? It's going to be like, oh yeah, this is a place that we bomb, right? A place that we go to and we do things in the name of whatever the mission is. But it creates this vision in the mind that leads to people to make snap judgments about places that have a certain name in the country's name. And all that does is it reinforces the view that these places are places to be bombed and to be controlled and to be taken over. And so that is a whole other can of worms as well, man. And like, okay, so then we have this next line. Did I just say that out loud? Oh, well, it's not like it's something new. It's the logical extension of the decades of bilge water that you've let us pump into your homes, the pink noise that hums away in the background while you run the gauntlet we force on you every day, the billow candy floss that helps to soften the blow. Like, this is a concept that Chris explores throughout his songs over the years when he speaks about the minimum security resorts of complacency that we all live within as we get through this meat grinder of a society based on almost entirely upon competing with each other to be barely employed, right? To barely to have just get us by every month. And like the last 5 years alone were filled with the US government saying the secret part out loud, right? As the MAGA ideologues became emboldened after seeing the president get rewarded for behaving atrociously in public and not just behind closed doors, right? He would say things like Ukraine, if you're listening, or Russia, if you're listening, which would then stoke the ire of Democrats who would accuse the president of subverting international order. And then the administration would just say the Democrats were freaking out as usual, et cetera, et cetera. And around we go. But Trump would get away with it every single time because he would do it with such frequency by using the defense of, if there was anything wrong with it, why would I say it publicly? And it just sent us off into the most destructive path of national dialogue imaginable. And, that's just what I'm thinking of whenever I think about that saying the quiet part out loud and how destructive the last 5 years have been, because when you always say the quiet part out loud, it loses a lot of its actual impact when it happens. And then people fall into that complacency trap that Chris explores in songs like Zucosis as well, you know?
I think that's super important to point out, Greg. And, you know, each week when we talk about songs that, you know, you and I are so familiar with that we kind of know like the back of our hands, that usually there's always a lyric that hits a little differently. Like it just connects in a way that I hadn't considered before. And I think that, you know, the gauntlet we force on you every day is the lyric that really is standing out to me now, that I'm thinking about differently, because just so much of just the apologism that you hear, especially when there's like the use of lethal force, when there's the murdering of teenagers, of children in Chicago or elsewhere, and people immediately blame the parents. And what's so important here is that the band is empathizing with the parents, knowing that there's no way to keep them fully protected against these systems that have more power, they have more wealth, they have more reach, they have in many ways far more influence. They control their lives in terms of, you know, like maybe they see the military as the only way to have an opportunity to get an education, to get a career, to get out of a poor community, right? Like there are these systems and the circumstances put into place that parents didn't get to control. But then if something happens, then they're going to be blamed for whatever in the first place. And I love that the band is throwing their lot in with the parents here, which it seems like even before they were parents themselves, understanding how hard it is and how hard it is going to keep their children safe and protected from these messages.
And that connects with the Jugend Marschiert aspect of the title as well, right? Like we can't forget about this entire history of how the state raises children. And we'll get into that as well when we talk about Coach's Corner, flag to raise the children. Do you know what I mean? So like there's these other connections across the different songs, but there are so many societal forces and variables at play here that parents have no control over, and we just have to deal with it. And like, so then he goes on to say, deep down, you've always known that your children already belong to us. So why don't you cut the outraged parent routine, shut your mouth and get back in your seats? Your children already belong to us. What are you? You will pass on, and they won't know a fucking thing, but this community, this real life Ender's Game, forget what you think you know. And I'm just like, oh God, just reading those lyrics out loud, like gives me, like my arm hair stands up, right? Yeah. This is dark stuff, man. This is the real darkness of, you think you're free? Guess again. If you wrote down a list of everything you're beholden to, you begin to feel pretty much the opposite of free, right? And like earlier, I was talking about how like by 1939, 90% of German children were in Hitlerjugend. Some parents opposed the regime, so this allowed the party to remove the equation of the parents in raising their own children. And that's what the lyrics are referring to here to me, like turning kids into specific kinds of ideologues where the influence of the parent ceases to matter, because if you have peacenik parents, those kids can still be gotten to through subversive measures. And then you can like undo the in-home conditioning through these outside the home conditioning variables led by people with very specific agendas, very extreme amounts of money, and every single tool at their disposal to undo the lessons and objectives and forces for good that any parent can put into their kids' heads. And like that Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card reference gets dropped here. And it's a book that I haven't read yet.
Neither have I, no.
So that said, it's a book where in preparation for an anticipated third invasion, children, including the novel's protagonist, Andrew Ender Wiggin, are trained from a very young age by putting them through increasingly difficult games, including some in zero gravity. And Ender is revealed to be a tactical genius. So like, just like the book's main story, the use of video games to instill a soldier's mindset into children is a deeply cynical recruiting tool to basically meet kids where they're at and put messages at them until you make them what you want them to be. And it's just unbelievable.
Greg, the only thing I'm going to say about those last lines that you read is that so many tracks from Propaganda have just gotten an upgrade since my son was born, right? And I thought some of them were going to be pretty obvious. Like Zoocosis already hit me hard.
Obviously.
Unscripted Moment already hit me hard. But I was not really expecting this last part to hit me hard this week, or even what you just said. I mean, that kind of that kind of really puts a little shake into my knees in thinking about the influence elsewhere that is, nefarious, and it is not in good faith, and it wants to manipulate and change. And that really has me thinking about this song a lot differently too. Like, even if I don't play video games, I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not just about video games here. Yeah.
Did you find any good YouTube comments for this song?
Yeah, I found a couple, Greg. I found one that says their lyrics are far superior to anyone in their genre, probably in all of music.
Mm-hmm. I'm only going to read one this episode. One downvote, General Casey Wardinsky.
Nice.
What else you got?
I have one more. It says, I completely lose hope sometimes that this world has anything good to offer anymore. I feel completely berated by the shit in this world to the point I don't want to live in it. But when I hear songs like these, see people like these with such defiance, and see the people that support them, it gives me hope that something better is worth fighting for.
Love it. Well, Keith, do you want to tell me about what your takeaway thoughts are, some teachable moments that you're walking away from this conversation with?
Right, Greg. I'd imagine that for a lot of people, starting off a song with a Hitler Youth March is excessive, and people might think that it takes a point too far. But I think defensively rocking back and digging in our heels to say, like, America isn't like Nazi Germany, like, that misses the point of the song. And I hear the introduction as a warning that we can so easily recognize propaganda elsewhere, like in other countries, but also in the past. Like, it's so much so that it's cartoonish, it's over the top, it's gratuitous. You can't miss it. But Americans have gotten so numb and blind to the images and the messages shouting war that we don't see the manipulation of media, information, and entertainment happening right in front of our eyes. And that has only gotten worse since the song has come out. This makes me secretly wish my son would stay his age forever, that I'll never have to worry about what video games he plays or what apps he uses or what hateful messages he picks up from being sucked into a YouTube algorithm after being identified as a suburban white male.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously I'm not serious, but what I do know is I have to talk about these things explicitly with my son to help him develop his Roddy Piper sunglasses for sentimental appeals, for national myths, and of course for military propaganda.
Yeah. And, I don't have a son. I have a daughter. And times like these, I'm actually kind of relieved that I have a girl, because she's not the target demographic for grievance in this current society. And, I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, what would it mean to raise a young boy in an environment right now where certain facets of our society are telling white boys, you are an oppressed population now. And so you got your work cut out for you on that. And I'm glad you're thinking about it early and often. But so for me, this song is like the outside influence upon our children of insidious factors basically is beyond our control. And it's pretty terrifying. I think of all the press releases from families over the last few years of families who have had to publicly disavow their own children's white nationalist or racist worldviews. And these statements always say something along the lines of, This is the antithesis of the values we sought to instill in our children, and we are horrified by XYZ, right? Think about like the Charlottesville stuff and how so many parents had to come out and disavow their own children publicly in public statements because their children were at the Charlottesville stuff, right? And it just goes to show that there is only so much a family can do in raising a child, which is a theme that will come up in Coach's Corner, like I said, someday.
Yeah.
Like our YouTube channels, broadcasters on primetime sports shows, the talk radio that our parents play, the Reddit groups our kids look at, the podcast conspiracy theory episodes that get consumed, they all do a massive dog pile upon the intellect, ideas, and worldviews that were taught to us until we just become pillars of self-doubt. And then we crack and go certain directions with our worldviews. And man, it's scary. So anyway, do you want to go ahead and rate this song?
I'll just say first, well said, buddy. Well said.
Thank you. Me too.
You know, I really think this this is the first song that I heard when the album came out. It was a grower. It's pretty lyrically dense. The music is melodic and mid-tempo compared to what I was familiar with today's Empires.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a remarkable song that tackles militarization, manipulation, propaganda, all of those things that you just said, Greg, like some other tracks on Potemkin, but they do it in a way that the band doesn't repeat themselves. I'm giving this a 5, Greg.
Okay. I'm going to give this one a 4.5. And I really like the idea that Chris had recently of lopping 20 seconds off the middle of the song on the breakdown. Mm-hmm. And so I like the idea of making it a little shorter to keep the storyline flowing ahead a little bit faster. And I also, like I said earlier, my only critique is that some of the lyrics feel placed on top of a finished product, and they didn't seem like they necessarily went together, and that they were kind of like, you know, sequenced in a way that didn't feel quite as natural as some of other Chris's remarkable vocal performances. So in that regard, I'm going to chop off half a point and give it a 4.5, but what an incredible piece of work that this song is. And it freaks me out that it only gets more relevant with time, which is one of the things that propaganda is so unbelievable for. Like we just passed the 25th anniversary of Let's Talk More Rock, and that record is still as fresh as the day it came out, it feels like. So this song is like 16 years old now, and it's just getting more and more freaky. So stay diligent, everybody out there listening, especially if you got kiddos at home. But this has been a wonderful conversation with you, Keith. I'm so glad that we finally got to America's Army, Jugend Marschiert. Thank you so much to our guest, Mikey Elfers, for coming and hanging out. Go check out Mikey's show at that'sgoodenoughforme.com. It's called Who's Zoomin' Who. It's a video show. And if you want to get in touch, let us know what you think about the game or gaming in general, etc. Fill in some of our gaps in our own knowledge. You can email us at propagandipod@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at propagandipod. And we will see you next time for episode number 50.
Did I say that out loud? Well, it's not like it's something new. It's just a logical extension of the decades of Bushwater.